Well, welcome to our first edition of Truth Matters, Stories of America told by Americans, and we're joined by a great American today. Kay Hoflander, a friend of mine. We've become friends since, when did we meet? October, something like that, of last year.
I think it was early fall.
Yeah, early fall. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, but welcome. We are actually sitting in the Lafayette County Courthouse in Lexington, a beautiful old courthouse. And your husband's actually the presiding commissioner here, Harold.
That's right. You're sitting right in front of his desk there.
How did you guys meet, you and Harold?
Oh, that's a story.
Well, that's what we're here for.
Blind date.
Really?
Yes. I had a newspaper I owned, a weekly newspaper. I started it from scratch. Actually, I started it on my washer and dryer, laying out the newspaper. And the town we lived in, Boonville, had a daily, but they didn't have a weekly. And so I saw the opportunity, so I was young enough and naive enough to decide, I'll just jump in and do that. So I did. And one of my big advertisers was Rick Ball Chevrolet. Yeah, Chevrolet, but we're Ford people.
Right.
But so one time I went in to sell him an ad, and that was okay, that went fine. And then he said, by the way, so I've got this friend, the story.
Right, I got a friend.
Yeah, I got a friend. And is it okay if he calls you? And I go, well, I don't have time, I'm not really interested in anything like that. And so he did, he called anyway. And so I said, okay, but just, I don't have much time because I was really working around the clock on my newspaper. And so we went to dinner in Columbia, came back to Boonville, and he said, Harold said, is it okay if I call you again? And I said, well, I'm really busy for the next 2 weeks, so maybe in 2 weeks. And just brushed it off, never thought about it hardly at all. And I mean, 2 weeks, to the day, to the minute, he called. And it was a car salesman. He was a car salesman. So car salesman set us up, and I didn't have a chance,
Right.
against car salesmen.
He closed the deal?
Closed the deal, yeah.
How long have you been married?
40 years.
Wow.
This June.
That's great. And you how many kids do you have?
We have 5, and we have 10 grandchildren and about to have our
Wow.
11th.
What made you want to be a reporter to begin with?
Oh, okay. Well, that takes me back to 8th grade.
8th grade. Wow.
8th grade. I was very active in 4-H, and I was a delegate to 4-H State Club Week, or whatever they called it at the time. They've changed the name now. And so I went, and it was at the University of Missouri and in Columbia, and so part of the trip was you got to pick 3 colleges on the university campus that you'd like to tour. Well, I'd always enjoyed writing and reading and everything, so I went to journalism school. Well, that sold me right then. That's what I was going to do. I was going to be a reporter, and that's what I did. So
You ended up going to MU.
Went to MU.
Columbia, the journalism school there.
Yes. Majored in news editorial.
And how long were you in the newspaper business?
Well, that's another story. I have a lot of stories. So we did really well, and we began to take ads away from the daily newspaper. And so in 2 years, they wanted to buy me out and gave me a very good offer, so I sold it in 2 years, and then they continued to operate it just like I had it for, several years after that. But I took the deal.
And at what point did you get from journalism into the political world of politics?
So that would have been 2003 that I really got involved and really jumped in.
Bush Cheney?
Yes, in the John Kerry, Bush second term.
Right.
So my son Russ was working for Homeland Security. Well, not Homeland Security yet. He started with ICE, and he moved up through Homeland Security. Mm-hmm. And he called me one day and he said, "Mom, I'm going to lose my job. We've got to win this election, or Bush isn't going to be carry in every little town. Every little county matters. So do everything you can." Well, you know, a mom wants her kids gainfully employed, so that I jumped in and I didn't know what I was doing. And I asked him, "Where do I go? What do I do?" And he said, "I don't know, just go somewhere up in Kansas City and find some office. You can find some Republican office somewhere." So in Independence, they did have a Bush campaign office. And at that time, there were no signs, because I don't know if you remember then, but there was a lot of vandalism of campaign offices and bombings, mm-hmm. and it was a dangerous thing, so they didn't put signs out. But I had the address, so I found it. I went in, and there were all my friends. It was
So what did you do for them?
Oh, just the grunge work.
Yeah.
You know, phone calls, signs, doors.
I heard you put flyers inside bags
Grocery
at Piggly
sacks.
Wiggly.
Yes. I didn't know that I wasn't supposed to do certain things. I just asked the store manager, and he didn't care. And so I did. I put in campaign flyers for county candidates and state candidates.
So you changed your career because your son needed to keep his job?
Pretty much, yeah. But the real truth is I loved it. So
Yeah.
as soon as I got a taste of it.
What is it you love about politics and the political world?
Oh, the people, the excitement, living on the edge a little bit. Mm-hmm. It's a little dangerous in some respects, and you do have to make sacrifices, and you may lose friends, which I have over time. Because once you say publicly, I've chosen a side, then that doesn't go over well with everyone.
Did you find it was a lot easier when you were a journalist and you tried to play it down the middle, that you didn't have to take sides, or did you find that more difficult, that you couldn't be true to yourself?
Well, when I was doing newspaper work, we were more down the middle. We didn't take sides. There wasn't as much opinion in the reporting or editing as there is now. And this, of course, you've seen it, we've all seen it, a huge change in journalism. And it was once, I think, a fine, honored profession. And
so what's happened to it? What's happened to journalism in America?
Well, a couple things. One, if you want to get really down to the core of it, I believe, is the ownership of the various media, whether it's television stations or newspapers. That's part of it. They're told what to do. You well know that. And the other part is the journalism schools are turning out students that they don't want to report the news. They want to bring their own ideals, their own beliefs into it, and they want to change.
You want to advocate.
Yes, and they want us all to change to what they want, and that's those two things I think are the downfall of journalism: the ownership that demands a certain thing, and then the idealistic new journalists that come in every part of the business.
It doesn't seem like news organizations are really, they recruit diversity when it comes to race and gender, socioeconomic background, as they should, so you can get a fair complement of voices to the readers or viewers or listeners that you serve. But they don't do that when it comes to diversity of thought. Why do you think that is?
Well, they used to, again. I do think they used to, but, because unless you're 100% in agreement with them, you're wrong. And I don't see that changing for quite a while. I think journalism is failing on its own because people are seeing through a lot of this. Newspaper subscriptions, as we know, are virtually gone. Many newspapers can't make it anymore. And right here in Kansas City, the Kansas City Star is hanging on by a thread. It's very well known that they're struggling.
Right.
Ads, subscriptions, trust. Where has trust gone? Do we trust what we read? No, we don't. And then, of course, you have the whole advent of social media, which has changed everything. The way we get our news, what we think. Something happened to me the other day. Our grandson that just graduated college was talking to me about what is so upsetting to him or his friends that he tries to talk to. He's a hardworking kid, did an internship, secured a job, and his friends, many of them, are just sitting around. They're not really interested in working. They get a paycheck from the government, many of them, or their families take care of them. They really don't have that work ethic anymore and want to go out and do anything. So he said, I try to talk to them. I try to tell them about how much better it is if you find a career, work hard, work your way up, take your time. It won't happen overnight. They don't want to hear that. He said, my friends don't even want to do it that way. They don't see any need to. They're very content to just sit back and let somebody pave the way for them. That was eye-opening to me because he's talking with kids his own age, college kids. Now, granted, they're not all like that. He's not, and there's many that aren't. But it was disturbing.
It's disturbing for societal, for us to look at, but also when you think about the human soul and how God made us to be workers, He never talked about retirement, just to be productive, that creative spirit that He's given us to do something in His will and purpose, because everyone has a purpose and passion, or if they don't, maybe that's why so many people are so miserable, because they don't feel like they have a purpose or passion.
They don't feel like they have a purpose, and they need meaningful work. I've always believed that anyone needs some kind of meaningful work, whether it's volunteer work or actually working for a paycheck. You have to have some purpose, some meaning in what you're doing, and then happiness comes as a result of that.
So let's get back to your career. So you go from being a reporter, owning a newspaper, to getting into politics in 2004. How do you end up becoming the chairman of the state Republican Party?
One day at a time, hard work, no idea where any of that was going when I started or wanted it to go anywhere other than the immediate goal, which was to elect good people in office. That was number one. Get the right candidates, elect good people, and that is what, if every county would work hard to do that, find good people for the courthouse, and then work hard to elect them. Roy Blunt always said the path to the State House is through the courthouse, and it is. It all starts in the counties, and it's vital. So you couldn't get any further at the bottom of the political party structure than I started. When I got started in Lafayette County, there were 3 people left on the Central Committee, and it was inactive, completely inactive. And one of the people I met up at Independence at the Bush campaign headquarters was a young woman from Odessa. And she was there doing the same thing I was. How can we help? What can we do? We don't know what to do. So we're finding you. You help us help. And so we got acquainted, and then we decided, you know what, we need to breathe some life into Lafayette County. And so we did, and we went to the current chair, who was virtually retired, and he said, great. And there's a little process. I have to go turn it into the Lafayette County clerk, and then that'll make it official. She'll send it to Jeff City, to the Secretary of State. So that's how we became official, basically reorganized that way because there weren't any other people. There was a treasurer and a secretary, but they were inactive too. Everyone was inactive.
Well, for folks listening who may not know, this was heavy Democrat country. And
Exactly.
It's only in the last, 8 to 12 years, really, that it's flipped to more of a heavy
Started
Republican.
in 2010, really started to change. Yes,
So there
this
weren't a lot of people
this was
working on the Republican side here.
virtually none.
Yeah.
And the candidates that ran, sadly, didn't have our help. Like now, we have active, strong county committee that will help candidates, will help statewide candidates and national candidates. But yeah, this was Congressman Ike Skelton's hometown, Lexington, Missouri, and his home county, Lafayette County. And we were a blue county.
So then you rose in the ranks here locally, and then how did that work?
Well, no, I just actually started out as chair because there wasn't.
Oh, you did? You
There
just
wa-
start out as chair?
Yeah, I just started out as chair because the man that had done a fine job but was virtually done
Gotcha.
and had been done and retired from politics, and so it was just kind of an inactive.
Did you know what you were getting into when you took on that role?
No. No.
If you had known, would you have done it?
Probably, probably, because I always like challenges and adventures, and I have to take some of this back to my mother because that's the kind of person she was. So I kind of have felt like I've been channeling her for some time now. She would have been pushing me to do it, and she was a committee woman, and my dad, a county committee man in Randolph County, in Moberly, where it was a deep blue county at that time. So I've thought about that many times. She would have been pushing me to do it.
What is it about the difference between Republicans and Democrats? Why are you attracted to the Republican Party? Why are you a Republican?
Oh, just what we stand for. Everything in our party platform and in our preamble to our platform, to our bylaws of the state party, all the things in there which are the basics. We're pro-life, pro-gun, very much pro-country, very patriotic. We believe in hard work. We don't like handouts. All the things that we do as Republicans today is what it's been all along. And we don't like, as Republicans, we don't like a lot of regulation. And I think that was very appealing to me. And of course, I had been raised by Republican parents, but they were inactive until later in life. And then my son jumped in and got very active, and he's the one that really pushed me in.
Where do you see things heading in America? We have a lot of turmoil, a lot of dissension, a lot of division, people yelling at each other basically rather than listening, reflecting, and responding and trying to win people over to their side of thinking. Where do you see things heading?
Well, I'm always an optimist, and I go by the hope and belief, with a little science here, that the pendulum, by anybody's standard, they have to agree that it has swung. So far, we're having a hard time seeing it, but it's going to come back. It has to come back. And people are at that point already. I think on every front, people are finding themselves so frustrated and frightened by the Democrat Party that we see and the government in our country, that they are reaching the point of enough. They've had enough. They're going to come back.
They're starting to wake up. We're seeing that now with union members who feel like they're not adequately represented in their beliefs in God and family and gun
and
rights.
Hispanic communities and black communities, they've also had enough. And so they can see that the government run by Democrats is failing. It'd be hard to not look at it any other way, even Democrats look at it that way now. Even occasionally, you'll see something on national media, on CNN. You'll begin to see some comments that are noting this very thing.
The chinks in the armor. You just can't hide the truth forever. And then if you lose total trust, then you have no product to offer as a journalist. You worked through the 2010, the Tea Party movement. How does that, what happened then, we're now 12 years out from that, and the MAGA movement and what's going on now in the Republican Party, contrast and compare that for us.
Well, I'll give you a little story. On January 1st of 2010, the first Tea Party in the state of Missouri was on the courthouse steps in front of Lafayette County, or in Lafayette County, right out here. And it was a group of the Tea Party, little groups that just, they just bubbled to the surface. It was organic.
Right.
And we took people like that we could see it here. So our Central Committee and a lot of our volunteers worked with a couple of gentlemen that were part of that Tea Party group that wanted to do a rally on the courthouse steps. So we came together and from day one here and worked with them to bring forward all the change that they wanted to see at that time, which looks like nothing now. Looking back on the Tea Party,
it was a cakewalk.
It was Casper milk toast. It was nothing. But at the time, it was unusual. And then
that groundswell, that grassroots.
And that's
effort.
what that year there were more presiding commissioners elected in the state of Missouri than ever before. And it came from that grassroots swell, and that went nationwide. We had more. That's the year the Republican numbers in Congress were huge, and that was from the Tea Party movement. Now, a lot of those folks, and I think most people probably know that, maybe they don't, but a lot of them didn't stay. They did a term, maybe 2 terms, and it wasn't for them, and they went back home. So the Tea Party began dwindling and its force becoming less and less. But personally, I welcomed the Tea Party. I thought it brought a lot of change. We worked with the folks that were wanting to do that. We had one in Odessa, one on in Alma, and we just worked with them, and it was great. That's the year that Vicki Hartzler was elected. She grew out of that Tea Party movement too.
People were fed up. They'd had enough.
Yes. And it was Nancy Pelosi. That was really, it's hard to believe then, but she's still here, still doing it. But it was a real backlash against Nancy Pelosi. And the problem Ike Skelton made was voting with her and leaving the ag votes behind that he always used to support and going with her policies. And that's when, in this district, and then we were in the 4th Congressional District, that's when a lot of things changed.
So now, 2022, 12 years later, the MAGA movement, some division within the Republican Party, the mainstream Republicans versus those farther to the right of those. How do you see that playing out? What are some of the issues now that you see going on within the party?
There are some other groups that have started up around the state that are kind of offshoots of what
We the People?
Yeah, that's one for sure. And I think they're going to not get as big as the Tea Party movement, but they're growing. And I think the party can work with them. I really do. I think that's the problem, is we're not very far apart with some of the groups that use the rhino term, the establishment term, which I, with a background in English and journalism, I think that is, it's name calling, it's a slur, if you ask people that use that term, a lot of times, what does it mean? And I don't mean just saying a Republican in name only. What is it? What does that mean when you call somebody that? And they can't answer that. They don't really know. What bothers me is our good volunteers that are hardworking volunteers get some of those attacks made against them, and certainly office holders. But most of them are not taking money from anybody. They're hardworking, good, honest people. So that is a thing that I needs communication. I think we could sit down as a party and talk about some of this directly. Now, I don't know if they'd be willing to listen and we'd be willing to work together, but I think we're at the point we've got to work together. There's the way to beat the Republican majority is to divide us, and so I would like to see a lot more internal sit down, talk, can we figure this out? And if we can do that, then I think we can. If we let ourselves continue to be divided, that worries me a great deal.
Is the Republican Party now what the Democrats used to be, in that the party, the big tent party, more welcoming to more ideas and backgrounds and types of families that may not be a part of the Republican Party before?
The new people joining the Republican
Yes.
Party, we're becoming the party of the working man and woman. We're becoming basically what used to be all unions were automatically Democrats. Now, many of those working people who are union members are not. And that's changing quite a bit. We're becoming the party of the working person. It's really changed. It used to be the Republican Party was kind of aristocratic, corporate, big money, Chamber of Commerce, and it's really flipped in that. And if you want to talk about real grassroots, I think we have it everywhere in this country right now with that switch. And it's quiet. I mean, it's not loud like Tea Party and things like that. It's a quiet movement because they can't afford anything. Look at inflation. That brings a lot of them over.
Food,
safety,
fuel.
security, food, fuel, all that has made the average family say this isn't working. So I think that's it. The government is not working to help the citizens of this country, and they can see it. And it's failing.
We're going to do something about it in a couple of months.
Okay, good for you.
I want to talk about your book, Musings,
sure.
Baby Boomer, Life Before X, Y, and Z, Musings of a Baby Boomer. The first thing when I saw your reviews on this and you sent me a few of the clippings and things, I thought Irma Bombeck, and someone else had compared you to Irma Bombeck. I grew up with Irma Bombeck.
Good.
I remember when she was on Johnny Carson.
One of the guests he had on more often, she was one of the top often booked on his show guests. Yeah.
And your writing style and your way of telling stories that baby boomers like me can identify with is really inspiring, and it makes you feel warm just reading some of these stories.
Good.
How did
Thank
you? These were clippings from columns that you wrote, right?
Yeah, they're I had a weekly newspaper column, and originally the theme was supposed to be the reluctant aging of baby boomers, which lent itself to some humor, and and also you'll find some of them may make you not just laugh. There's others may make you cry a little bit.
Yeah.
And
a little wistful.
there's a little wistful. There's some on. There's one section on patriotism and politics, which isn't a very big section, but it's all about love of country, really, in that section, and in a little different vein. So each week I was supposed to write one of these. And this is probably my personality because I live on the edge a lot with politics. So I would push my deadline till the very, very end because I couldn't come up with an idea. So I would call family, friends, It's 8 o'clock at night. My deadline is 8 o'clock in the morning. I don't have an idea, and I would call people and ask, and they would tell me, well, just write about this. And then they'd think of something and they'd go, well, write about that. And then something as simple as that would give me an idea, and then I would take it from there. And so that was kind of living on the edge, procrastinating.
I'm like that too. I've got to wait till the very last minute if I'm writing a speech. It's no good unless it's the last minute.
It's got to be when it all comes up inside you and it swells up and comes out. Yes, and you can't force that.
Right.
I don't think. So that's how it started, and then the Examiner had a webpage, and readers could write in. So they would write in. I know there's one I did, does anybody eat liver and onions anymore? Mm-hmm. And then I got a lot of comment on that. Now that one's not in this book. There were over 300 columns, and there's about 70 in this book. So I have enough for a sequel. I don't know if I'll do it, but just the selection and editing of it took quite a lot of months to do.
There's one from Colin from 06, Boomers Won't Go Quietly, and you say, either way you look at it, baby boomers have put a decidedly different slant on this aging business that have previous generations. Furthermore, most of us boomers do not really care what history writes of us or how future generations judge us. Do you still feel that way?
Yes. I think they've redefined everything, the baby boomers generation, and we're redefining aging too. Because when my parents, my grandparents, people were old at 50. They sat down.
Right.
They quit. They didn't continue into all these things that the baby boomer generation has done. Many reinvent themselves all the time. New careers, all kinds of ways we do that. So yeah, I still feel that way. We came from Haight-Ashbury and burning bras to where we are now.
Yeah, what are we burning these days? Our masks.
Yes, hopefully. We're burning our masks, hopefully.
I thought about that when Anita Bryant was back in the day and the bra burning. I said, let's just have a big mask burning. That'd be nice.
Well, I heard yesterday that the pandemic is over.
Oh, yeah.
Officially.
After we've forgiven the loan, or the president has, I think, illegally forgiven the loans, because of the pandemic, is still going strong, and they must be given this financial relief. Mm-hmm. But all of a sudden now, today, they're gone.
It's gone.
Another chapter. My daughter's getting married 4 days after the election. I think I've told you that, November 12th, and so I have a tradition where I've always taken my daughter out for a couple of times a year, and we have a daddy date. We used to do it all the time. We go to Starbucks, and now we go to lunch. And I was giving her some advice on, just marriage, because marriage is work. Mm-hmm. And Leslie and I have been married 33 years, and it's a lot of the art of selflessness in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And you've got some advice for mothers of the groom.
Oh, yes.
Shut up and wear beige.
Uh-huh.
So
yes.
I take it this is from personal experience.
Yes, it is. It's really good advice after the wedding too. Mm-hmm. If you're mom of the groom, it's a good idea. And I love my daughters-in-law. We're very close, but I know not to intervene in their relationship.
That's hard sometimes, isn't
It's very hard.
Because you know what's right. You want to jump in.
You can almost see how it's going to end too, from life experience. But yes, don't be outshine anyone at the wedding.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah, sit in the back if you can.
One thing I told my daughter is, I think the biggest lie that's perpetrated on mainly American and Western culture is that marriage is 50-50. It is never 50-50. No. At best, it's 60-40. Yeah. And you got to have extreme grace because someone's always giving more than half.
Right. And on that, to that point, to make it work, everybody needs to give more than 50.
Yes,
each person.
Exactly.
You can't separate it even 60-40. It's got to be each person does more than 50. Yeah. And it can be in different ways that we do that. And I think, you can't
What's your favorite story in this book or your column that you really? I know it's kind of hard. There's kind of like children. Pick out your favorite child.
What's your favorite? Oh gosh, there's some that I think are kind of funny, but I don't know if anybody else would. But I think people do. But the family section, there's several funny ones in there. Of course, my husband was constant material.
And still is.
And still is. And he's like a gift. I mean, the stuff that comes out, I go, oh my gosh, I got my idea for the week.
Could you read a little excerpt for us? Find a heraldism there.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's the one when he came home and said, honey, I bought a bridge.
Mm-hmm. I bought a bridge.
Yeah. He came home and he said, I bought a bridge. And so, here's what I wrote.
Okay.
Honey, I bought a bridge, my husband said as he walked through the kitchen door one summer evening nearly 11 years ago. Now, I'll stop here when I say 11 years. Mm-hmm. That story was written in 2006. Okay. So in this whole book of stories, at the very end, it tells you when it was originally published. So I asked him if he meant to say he had shrunk the kids. But no, he said, in fact, he had bought a bridge. Now, I'm thinking that surely he must have said fridge. Nope, he repeated again, I bought a bridge. To which I replied, just out of curiosity, say if someone wanted to buy a bridge, how would one go about doing that? How do you buy a bridge? He said, spoken like a true car dealer, well, I got a great deal. I was thinking something along the lines of this. Exactly why do we need a bridge? Instead of saying anything, I waited for the sure to come long-winded explanation. Long story short, and believe me, it was a long story, he said it was just too good a deal to pass up. Seems as though his brother-in-law knew of a new bridge being put in somewhere along the Monarchy River in south central Missouri. The county gave the old bridge to the contractor and let him figure out how to dispose of it. The contractor had no need for an old steel bridge and told the folks in the area that he would sell it cheap if someone would haul it off. What a great deal, my husband continued. Not only is there oak flooring still intact on the bridge, but guess what? There's a second bridge. It actually is better than the first bridge and has a plaque indicating that it was built in 1898. Hey, what can you do? A deal like that doesn't come along just any old day. Thereupon, we set out to find said bridge and figure out how to move it home. Are you with me on this? The best part of Mission Bring Home the Bridge we just bought was the woodland paradise scenery we found, gorgeous Ozark woods and clear streams. Locating the bridge was the easy part. Deciding how to move it home was the conundrum. The bonus bridge, only 25 feet long, would be simple to move. We could borrow Cousin Jean's trailer and haul it easily along the county roads and onto the interstate and home with no insurmountable difficulty. Don't ask me how we loaded it. Transporting the big bridge, 16 feet wide and 50 feet long, was a brain teaser for sure. State law prohibits traveling the interstate with such a long load, except for limited daylight hours. County roads are difficult to maneuver with curves and hills to negotiate. So, looks like we would now have to hire a tractor truck with a lowboy trailer and hire the job done. The cost of the bridge was mounting. The great deal was gone. Today, after 11 years of enjoying the view from our breakfast room of these two steel bridges in the field north of our house, I have no real complaints. Can't say as much for the neighbors. The wildlife loves the bridges, though. I've watched a fox take a nap on one of the beams, cats hunt mice in the weeds that have grown up around the bridges, deer enjoy the salt lick beside them, and wild birds roost on the girders. I have to say I'm somewhat at peace with my own bridges of Lafayette County after all this time. For a while there, the bridges, as we have named them, drove me crazy, and I even tried to sell them on eBay once. No bids whatsoever. I ran ads in magazines, told every contractor I knew about them. Yes, sirree, Bob, there's a sucker born every minute, and we are it. By the way, I have a couple of bridges that are always on the market, so pass the word. I can make you a great deal.
They're still there.
One. We actually sold one.
Really?
One's still there.
So did you make a profit after all the moving expense?
Oh, no.
That's funny. No. There's another column towards the end talking about Memorial Day and the significance. And Memorial Day is a big deal to my family. We go to Mount Moriah there in Kansas City. My in-laws are buried there. That's where Leslie and I have our plots. And Walter Cronkite's buried there. Tony DePardo, all these people that I've looked up to over these years. This is an odd time in history. The death of Queen Elizabeth, really the end of an era for, I think, our generation. We're seeing this torch being passed to a new generation, and not necessarily King Charles at this point, but his son, who will likely become king within 2 to 3 decades. How does that? How does this change in time? How do you look at that? It's what we're dealing with in society and how we function as a people, as a nation.
I'm not sure I'm understanding.
Okay.
Tell me a little more.
With the passing of a queen, the Queen of England, it is really the end of an era.
Okay, I understand.
So now we're entering this new era. You've talked about the musings of a baby boomer. Now we're dealing with all these new generations. Do you have hope for the future?
I always do. Yes, the passing of the Queen is decades of the way culture, especially in the United Kingdom and England, looked at governance. They looked at the monarchy. And 70 years, I believe, she served as queen, which is the longest, I believe, in the world of any monarch. So will the monarchy last? What will happen there? Will it develop into something different? And just as we're facing in our country, will our democracy last? Will our founding fathers, what they envisioned, still be with us in 2 or 3 more decades? I think England's facing it in a different way than we are, but yet we're all facing the same thing. I am optimistic. I think this country will survive. It's going to have to change, and people have to get involved. I don't know what will happen in England. That's a completely different situation. But I think they love their traditions there, and I think those will hold in some fashion. But here, where we live every day, and our constant worry, and I think a lot of us have this worry and prayers every day for our country. And I think that's a big part of it. We have to pray for our country, and I think every day. And I do feel like the Constitution is solid, and it will survive all these attacks against our republic, and we're a republic. And so, yeah, I would say I definitely am, but it won't happen unless the average person, not just those of us that are very actively involved, but the average person begins to see what they have to do in their own lives to make this happen and to keep this great country. I think one thing I've noticed through pro football that's already shifting a little bit, you remember when we had the all the kneeling and the Colin Kaepernick anti-country and so many pro athletes, especially in NFL football. This season already, we get to see the national anthem on television again. They brought it back. You know, they didn't even show it for a while. That was their response. Okay, well, it's divisive, so we won't show it. They're bringing that back. That's hopeful to me. Why are they bringing it back? People want it back. It has to be it. And then, do you see people kneeling? Not this season. So I'm taking that as a sign.
Baby steps.
Yep.
Well, Kay, thank you so much. Thank you for all you've done and continue to do. Thanks for being my friend and advisor to some degree. And, you know, I've said from the very outset that truth matters, and that's kind of what we based our campaign on. And I know you're a big believer in that, because truth is going to set us apart, what's right and what's wrong. And people, like you say, taking a stand for that right, for that truth is going to help, I think, save America to a lot of degrees. Thanks for being part of America and telling your story.
Thank you, and good luck to you in Washington.
Thank
You're
you.
going to be great.
Thank you.